The Chinese were doing this activity technically in Bhutanese territory. Their action mattered to our security. We took a decision, went across. The Chinese claimed 270 troops along with dozers came and stopped them.
Telling you again, this is not the way. Not use force. No, ready. I'm telling you, don't do it.
But yes, we did send troops who physically stopped the dozer from moving.
Explain the physically stopping, sir.
Troops came in and came very close to them that they could not move forward. They have dozers and our people were there, only human beings, to physically stop it. If somebody had decided to ride the dozer over...
Raise the bulldozer over them then?
Fortunately for us, on our side we were constructing a road and we had dozers. Not tanks, not guns, but it was the two dozers who went across and got face to face with their dozers to stop them.
Today on the podcast, we sit down with a soldier who has stood at the very edge of India's most intense front lines and shaped history while doing it. Lieutenant General Anil Kumar Bhatt, a name that echoes across South Block, Srinagar, and every operations room that lived through one of the most critical modern military standoffs, Doklam 2017. As Director General of Military Operations, he was in the chair when India and China tested each other's resolve on that narrow Himalayan ridge. And if that weren't enough, he went on to command the legendary Chinar Corps from 2018 to 2019. Under his watch, Kashmir saw one of its most intense counter-terror chapters, with the highest number of terrorists neutralized in over a decade. And today, we unpack it all, the untold stories, the toughest calls, and the milestones that defined his life in uniform. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
It's my pleasure to be here at the TOA podcast. Thank you for calling me.
You've called Doklam the high point of your military career, so to speak. You were the DGMO at that point. How was communication behind between the Indian forces and the Chinese PLA during that time? Because we've heard about the DGMO's role during Operation Sindoor when there was a call from the Pakistani side to the Indian side, which stopped the 4-day war and Operation Sindoor at that time. So give us a sense. You were DGMO at the time of the Doklam crisis. How was communication at that time?
Okay, so before I start precisely on the communication, I should tell you that when I took over as DGMO somewhere in January 2017, and fortunately for me, the theatre commander, Western theatre commander of the China, along with his Tibetan district commander and many others, came to India.
Okay.
And for 2 days, we had meetings across the table, informal and formal meetings. They were led by General Vipin Rawat, who was the Vice Chief, and I as the DGMO. It was a great insight into communicating with your adversary. Meeting them offline, online, talking of things military, things personal. One got a much better insight into whom we were dealing with. And let me tell you, during the crisis, those talks we have had was the background which helped us to decide better. Now coming to precise communication, with the Pakistanis, we have a very evolved system, from down to the company level where we have company level meetings to at the DGMO's level, where it is a defined thing where every week the DGMO or his brigadier, I've been on that assignment also, communicates with the Pakistanis every week. And you share what has happened on the border, try to resolve issues and all. And as you are aware, during Operation Sindoor, that had proved very effective. With the Chinese, the Indians have been proposing this method for a long time, but somehow it has not evolved to a hotline between DGMO to DGMO, because firstly, they don't have any appointment equivalent to a DGMO. Their theatre commander is more important. And we didn't want to limit it to a theatre, but have it at the highest level of the PLA. But that said, we have communication at the company commander level, at the battalion commander level, at the brigade commander level, and there are border personal meetings which are carried out at different levels. Even on the Chinese border, there are places where the troops from both sides meet, formally meet. And there are those points where whenever there is a crisis, up in Leh and Ladakh to even in Sikkim where we have at Nathula, such points are there. So those are the means of communication. But yes, no direct communication at the highest level formally does not exist.
That's very interesting. So, no direct hotline, no direct communication. So, what made you realize what that first moment that Doklam could escalate? Because interestingly, it's the first time that we actually scared off the Chinese and got them to back off from whatever they were building across that ridge. So, what was that moment when you realized that this is a big standoff? Was there any communication, and from whom?
Okay, so the build-up to Doklam and Dokala and what happened there did not take place in a day. Like I said, the first time in January when we spoke to him, while mentioning Sikkim, he would say, okay, if this happens, this is totally unacceptable to us, slightly in aggressive way, hinting maybe he'll do something. So in the back of my mind as a DGMO, there was that something could build up on the Chinese border. That said, also before this, there were small conflagrations which they tried to escalate on the border, Sikkimese border. There's a place called Finger we have there, where they try to clash their vehicle with our vehicle, have a kind of a confrontation. Not that it was happening for the first time, but this time it was a little more aggressive. These were hints that maybe something could build up. But that fine day morning, and I should share it with you on 16 June, early morning report, 6 o'clock, everything was fine. As a DGMO, every morning and evening you get a report from the duty officer, from what all is happening on the Indian borders. Is there a situation of crisis and all? There was nothing. But when I walked into office and reached there by 9, there was my colonel standing, telling me about something which has happened, that troops have collected, there's a dozer, and maybe they have some intent of making a road. In another half an hour, one was told that they are now planning to make a road which will come to the Zamfiri Ridge. And what that does mean is, Zamfiri Ridge is a ridge which oversees the Siliguri corridor. Now, it was a decision to be taken. Do we stop them? Do we talk to them and send a message and all? The fact was, if they had changed the fact on the ground, the fact on the ground is if they had rolled a road, all other things would have been. I walked towards the chief, of course, and fortunately, we had a chief who had the ability to take high risks and be decisive. And now there was the decision, how we have to stop the Chinese. How do we do it? And stopping the Chinese was to stop them physically from using that dozer to make the road with those troops. Sure. And if it had to be done physically, we had to cross over and go to the territory which was of Bhutan and not us. Made the decision.
But Bhutan is a friend.
Bhutan is a friend, but it was the Chinese were doing this activity technically in Bhutanese territory.
Yeah.
But their action mattered to our security. They were changing a norm which had been there. And of course, we took a decision, went across. The Chinese claimed 270 troops along with dozers came and stopped them. But yes, we did send troops who physically stopped the dozer from moving. Now, there's a very interesting story.
Explain the physically stopping, sir.
Troops came in and came very close to them that they could not move forward. Now, here was something for us which was a challenge, that they have dozers to clear and make a road, and our people were there, only human beings, to physically stop it. If somebody had decided to ride the dozer over,
raise the bulldozer over them, then?
Fortunately for us, on our side we were constructing a road and we had dozers. So the first, not tanks, not guns, but it was the two dozers who went across and got face to face with their dozers to stop them. So it was border road organization dozers were there, fortunately, and we decided to use them in an unconventional manner to put them across. In fact, the first photographs Chinese put across of Indian aggression, where they said this is our area and these dozers have come to on our side, we had done it. And that is how we physically stopped. That maybe surprised the Chinese, because maybe they did not think of such a strong reaction from us. And then on, of course, 72 days of confrontation, a line of troops from both China and India standing eyeball to eyeball, 24/7 for 72 days.
Explain to us, had they built that road, had they built that road, how would it have altered India's security interests? Number one. Number two, if we stopped them from building that road, had we, we took a decision that we will go and stop them at that time. If we had not, what would have happened?
Okay, now the Chinese had built a road to a point which was short of about 2 kilometers from the Zamfiri Ridge. There is Amochu, there is a Nala. Short of that, this was the point where they had made it over the years. It was by salami slicing, little and little going ahead into the territory, which was not theirs, but was Bhutanese, and they were claiming it was theirs. Now, if they had ultimately made this final connect and connected it to the Zamfiri Ridge, they would have easily been able to bring troops to Zamfiri Ridge, logistics and troops. And once they occupied Zamfiri Ridge oversees the entire Siliguri corridor. It would have been a huge vulnerability for us. Siliguri from there is 80 to 100 kilometers, but visually China would be able to see that and dominate it. So it was very, very important for India's security to draw the red line, which we did, and stop them.
You said the Chinese were surprised by our response. Was there a moment that you or anybody on the Indian side hesitated in taking such a strong stand? Because we stopped that book, we acted against a bully, and you call out the bully and you stop the bully, and that's the only way to stop a bully. But we'd never done it before.
So, firstly, this decision was not taken in emotion. It was a cool, calculated decision. But yes, the risks were there, and the risk was that we could have gone for a skirmish or a war. But what was at stake? The security of the entire Siliguri corridor. And most fortunately for the chief and for us, there was political clarity. They had given us the freedom to do what we had to. Unlike what people may believe, we did not take permission and then send troops across. We sent troops across and then told our political masters, we have done it, and they supported us to the hilt.
That's amazing. And, was there a moment when you were, there was some sort of realization that we were very close to perhaps a miscalculation in case things had gone wrong? Was there any moment of hesitation from the side of the forces? Because you said the forces took the decision and then informed the political masters.
So it was, we were very well aware of the risk to where it could go. And in the back of the mind, and personally for me, I had known 62. I have known 67. I have read history. And at that rank, at that stature, it was very important for me that I am not like the fall guys of 62. It is a responsibility to the nation that now we have to stand to it. Unfortunately, we had a chief who was bold, who had the ability to take risk, and we had a political hierarchy which was ready to hold a hand.
Tell us a story from during the Doklam standoff that has not been told before.
Two stories, not stories exactly, but facts about decision making at the highest level and how it is important. After this has happened, we went to brief the Prime Minister, and it was not we only, it was the NSA, it was the Foreign Secretary, it was Madam Sushma Swaraj, who was the Foreign Secretary, Foreign Minister, and the Chief and myself, and we briefed the Prime Minister for the first time on the whole incident. The best part of that was that he did not take more than a few minutes to say, okay, what you've done is right. Now we have to find an answer to how we have to resolve it. One was that. The second was collective leadership then on. We were meeting nearly, if the crisis was for 72 to 74 days, I think we met every day, if not nearly every day, and met at different places. It was the NSA, it was the Foreign Secretary, it was the Chief, it was the Raw Chief, it was the IB Chief, and every day we were looking at multiple dimensions of this problem. Decisions were collectively taken and not taken by one person. So they were better. You saw all the aspects of the crisis, the responses what your adversary will give. Even our ambassador to China, who later became the Foreign Secretary, would very often come to India to brief us, to make us understand the Chinese perspective of it, because it was very clear to us that we would not like it to escalate to a war. And the best part is, which many in India have not noticed, is the crisis nearly started getting resolved after a month. And why it happened was, before that, all communications with the Chinese had broken down. They were not communicating. They were showing their irritation, anger, or whatever. And they were building up troops. Then the Prime Minister happened to go for a G20 meet to Germany, to Hamburg. And he went out of his way to meet Mr. Xi Jinping. There was no scheduled meeting. There was nothing. But in the hall at some place, the Prime Minister walked over to him. And they spoke. We don't know what it is, but I know what was told was that, okay, we should resolve this crisis. And that broke the ice. Xi Jinping told his people under him, let us now talk of it. So this thing which had nearly come to an edge of maybe building up to the war, the de-escalation took place. It was surely the Prime Minister realizing the seriousness of it and taking 2 steps forward to meet his equivalent from China.
So shedding the ego and saying, okay, let me go and talk to him. Let's try and not create more when it can be piped down.
So there's a beautiful photograph of that which shows all the advisors around Mr. Xi Jinping in a shock, because nobody wanted this to happen. And it was the 2 heads of state rising above small things and talking to each other.
All right. A few things that you learned about the Chinese mindset during that time when you were DGMO, when in the center of such a huge crisis, about the Chinese mindset. Now suddenly after Mr. Trump doing whatever he's doing with BRICS and everything, suddenly there's talk of India, China, bonhomie. Our Prime Minister went over to Beijing, to China, for conversations, all of that. How do you think, what should we be aware about the Chinese mindset, even as we extend a hand of friendship to them economically?
So we should be very clear that China is a rising power, and its competition is not with India, but with America. And to achieve that number 1 position, it will find its way to exert itself on its peripheries. We happen to be the largest person on the periphery. Now, for us, most important is we do not want to go to war with China, but we do not want to be subjugated by China. So, from a position of strength, from a position of strategic independence, which we have always propounded and believed in, we have to have a relationship with them. Now, what is most important and what I understood is they respect strength. They respect resoluteness. If you talk to them from a position of the strength, they will not push you beyond a point. But if you weaken your resolve, they are going to push you the way they do to many people in the South China Sea.
Right. And then they'll walk all over you. Typical behavior of a bully, by the way. You were responsible for maintaining readiness without triggering an escalation. It's a very thin line. What was the hardest decision that you had to take that maybe the public doesn't still know about?
So, the most important was to be prepared for a war if it happens. If we had taken such a stand and we had, in Doklam, we had to be prepared for the worst case situation. That included very important strategic and critical assets moving from the western border to the eastern border.
So we started moving them.
We did it, including a weapon which became very popular in Op Sindoor,
Okay, which one was this? Sorry.
Brahmos.
The Brahmos. Okay. So we moved everything
So,
and
yes, we were getting ready for if the escalation would have built up to some kind of skirmish or a war. You prevent a war by being ready and having adequate strength.
peace through strength. That's what President Trump keeps talking about these days. But any near miss moment that you remember which could have gone either way during that crisis?
In that area of Sikkim and all, there's a huge cloud cover, and especially in these months when the confrontation was taking place. So satellite imagery is not very effective. Your surveillance means are limited. And one fine day we see large number of guns and tanks popping very close to our border.
Oh.
Maybe 8 to 24 hours away.
Oh my God.
And this was all show of force. It was psychological, but it could also have manifested into something building much more, much close to where we would be comfortable with.
Okay. So that happened. And then what happened?
You have to send messages. You have to build up your own troops to an equal level in that areas. And we did that. So it was a game of chess going on all along the border. And one incident, of course, like you said, a moment which could build to a crisis. And there the maturity of both sides mattered. Was 15th August, where at Finger in Ladakh, there was a face-off which became a little too, became more than just a confrontation. And there were injuries on both sides. It could have built up. And here is where we are facing the Chinese face to face in Doklam. For both sides, send matured messages to each other and did not let that become a trigger for something more.
So at the starting, sir, you said that there was no hotline. How did you guys
like
send messages to each other?
This is from we had messages at the company commander level, at the corps
and then
commander
they were trickled up.
Yes.
Rather than trickle down. Okay.
And here, what we did very effectively, because the troops were face to face, there were company commanders and battalion commanders meeting in a 24-hour cycle, sending messages. Many messages from me to my counterparts were going through what a company commander or a battalion commander was taking.
I got it. So it was a Chinese whispers sort of. Hopefully. Yeah. It didn't really, literally
and both sides conveyed messages through it. You could know that it was not a young battalion commander speaking, but it was coming from his hierarchy. And similarly, from our message, they could make out that it is coming from the highest end.
So Doklam standoff was one time that we stood up to a bully.
Yes.
And we showed that we are in a position of strength. You do this, we do exactly that. There's tit for tat waiting for you. And we made China back off. That itself is a huge achievement. How do you feel about that incident now looking back? It was perhaps the first time that we stood up to a bully and we told them to back off.
So, like I always say, it is a high point of my career in all. After being a DGMO, I had to live up to what assignment I had been given. And here was the best crisis or the best challenge I could handle. Maybe I didn't sleep for 72 days or had sleepless nights. Many others definitely up in the hierarchy would have had that. But it taught me lessons of the strength of the Indian Armed Forces and what we have to do as we go ahead.
Technologically speaking, in terms of if you start comparing missile for missile and air defense for air defense, the Chinese army, the PLA, is in a much better, well-equipped. Their defense spending is far more than India's. They're several years ahead of us. Did that not sort of bother us, this side of the border, even for a minute? If we had gone to war?
The thing is, the cost to the adversary would have been that they would have forgotten ever to become number one if they had taken that call. And I say this with conviction.
Would you explain that?
If China is planning to rise and become the number one country, if it gets involved into a war with India, it's over for them.
Because of?
Firstly, what would they like to achieve by doing it? We are not concerned about they becoming number one in the world. Exactly. We are concerned about our borders, our realities,
and our development.
Development. So if they pick up a war on that, it would be wrong for them, and that is why they have not done it. You see what has happened to Russia and Ukraine. Yeah. It has not achieved any of the war aims.
All right. Let me just move across to your stint at the Chinar Corps. You handled some of Kashmir's most complex sort of counter-terror operations. Tell us about your stint when you landed there. What did you expect and what did you find?
So, firstly, I had one major advantage, apart from my tenures there in the valley, was that I was going from the position of a DGMO. So, I understood in the overall Indian Army's view what the Chinar Corps commander is required to do, maybe better than others. So, I was very clear. One was Pakistan, the source of terrorism, the adversary on the LC, then was the terrorists who were there within the valley, and then there were the people. But very distinctly, I had to separate these three things. And I had to carry out counter-terrorist operations because Burhan Wani had happened a few years back. And that psychological mindset of Burhan Wani, where the people can take on the armed forces and get a revolution, was simmering and was still there as an emotion amongst people. Violence levels were pretty high. So the most important thing was, one, prove to everyone that the terrorists are not going to go far, reduce their numbers. We did that effectively. But along with it, we had to ensure we won over the people of Kashmir. 90% people in Kashmir, or 95 I would say, want to live a normal life like anybody in India.
Right.
They had to be assured that the Indian army was not their adversary, but was an ally.
How did you go about doing that? Because these twin objectives, they seem like oxymorons in this context, that you appease the public and tell them that you are with them and they can have a normal life. On the other hand, the terrorists, whom they consider, many of them consider, help them. They help them. They go out of their way to sort of give them space in their houses, even many times. How did you reconcile the two?
So this has to be done by multiple ways. It is like you have to walk the talk of saying you are our people. It is only the terrorists who are our enemy. To only say it at my level would have had no meaning. It had to be applied on ground while my people were carrying out operations. Right. And there, my term of reference was, okay, one terrorist who runs away, we'll have him tomorrow. But don't ensure that we do not have collateral damage. Ensure that some civilian or innocent does not get killed. That was very strongly not only propagated but practiced. I should give you an example. There was an operation going up near Anantnag where 2 to 3 terrorists were holed in, and the crowd was built up by the locals, and there were more than 2,000 people trying to protect this terrorist.
And this is post Burhan Wani.
Oh, much.
And there was a lot of
And 2 to 3,000. We know in another half an hour we'll get the terrorists. They're holed in. And the crowd is building up. The police is stopping the crowd. And suddenly I realized this violence we will kill the terrorists, but we will lose the narrative. And I took a decision, okay, pull back. We'll get them some other day. We are not going to. Today, leave it. It was not liked by many, even my troops, that what an opportunity, we had missed it out, or maybe it was being weak-kneed. But I was very clear I had done the right thing. There would have been much more civilians dead. which would not achieve our larger aim. And sure enough, after 4 days, we got those terrorists, 3 of them in the jungle, without any collateral damage. But what it did was, many such acts assured the people that we are not against them, which was very, very important for me. So even I had passed an order that if he is a Indian Kashmiri terrorist, give him a chance to throw his weapon. Call his mother or father to ask him to surrender, and if possible, let him surrender. We'll not kill him. If he does not fire at us, we are not going to neutralize him. That message did make a difference. Even the relatives of the terrorists and all realized that we were not a brutal force which had come from somewhere, but our aim was anybody who picks up the weapon against the nation, he will be neutralized.
Must have been a tough call at that time
yes.
to
And the
just let those terrorists go. When you said you were 30 minutes from sort of neutralizing them.
For good 2 days, today's social media, they became heroes. They were whistling, they were making interviews, and they were doing everything. So even the narrative was, oh, we can stop the Indian army. But quietly after 3 days when they did die, we told everyone this is what we can do.
Interesting. When you were the corps commander, under your tenure, highest number of terrorists ever neutralized in almost a decade. Tell us, what was the thought process behind that, and how did you go about, because that's highest number of terrorists in over a decade is a huge number.
And 10 years later now also.
And 10 years later now also. During your tenure, highest number
10 years before that is from 2007 till today.
Wow. Okay. So what is that? What was those 2 or 3 things that you did that perhaps helped you achieve those numbers and get you to, was it something that when you went down, you were there for a year or more, that you thought that I will do this, I will get this badge on my
So
thing?
let me tell you, numbers was not, and because like I said, on the larger perspective, numbers don't matter. So firstly, I never told my command, wherever I went, to the last man, to the captain who was operating on the field, that I want more. Kill more terrorists. No. I would always say, we have come here to neutralize terrorism, and not, numbers don't matter. But the other thing which I equally did was gave them complete freedom. I did not micromanage that corporal or that sergeant or that captain or any of them how to carry out their operations. And a very important aspect, of course, to neutralize such large number was intelligence. And a very large part of this intelligence comes from the local police. So one thing I really worked hard on was integrating all domains, that is the police, the CRPF and the army. So a policeman who has much better intelligence than us on a day-to-day basis, he and us, we had aligned that our objective was the same. They got us the intelligence, we got the muscle. And we used it together, and even accolades were shared. They were not that only the army has done it. And that, I think that helped. That cooperation between all the forces, including the civil administration, was a very, very important factor.
Interesting. Let's move on to drones, space and cyberspace. You recently said that these domains have fundamentally altered conflict, modern conflict. What is the first conflict or global incident that convinced you that India might have to rethink its doctrine?
So as far as drones go, as they came, the first war which really turned the other way was the war in Azerbaijan, where the side which had more tanks and guns lost the battle. It was a revelation that what all drones could do. Before that, it was theoretical. Okay, the drones can see, they can be used to hit you and others, but there it manifested on ground as a reality. And all armies over the world then started thinking, okay, we have to look at drones more seriously. And then it has got reconfirmed after we have had the war Ukraine and Russia, where it has had a very, very significant impact on the war. We all know it. We've been seeing it. But I would talk of space, which is more important. And space was important. Space started, human forays into space have taken place only for two reasons. One is for status and the other is for military. So the first satellites were, of course, American satellites, where they had the ability to see the whole world. But today this ability is there with everyone in the world. From space, you can see your adversary 24/7 anywhere. Now that said, that capability today is one with USA, with China, and 24/7, and with private companies like Maxar, Planetum. Now this changes the whole warfare, because if what is most important is to know where the enemy is. And today satellites, commercial satellites can tell you what all is there, what the enemy has. Fortunately, in India, space, we have capabilities which are far better than many nations. Thanks to ISRO. They have given us 60 years of a legacy of technical ability, which keeps us at the high table.
So, do you believe that we're moving towards a future where wars begin in space and not with a bullet?
Well, Ukraine war started from space. The first thing they attacked was all terminals of Viasat all over Europe. And they neutralized the entire communication of the Ukraine army. And of course, that is where a commercial player, and that is Starlink, came with all what it gave Ukraine. And Ukraine's communication then on has been through the satellites. So there is a new dimension which has come in as commercial players providing the assets.
Interesting. So, is there a blind spot that India perhaps has as far as space is concerned?
So what we've seen is we have the capability for three critical elements which the armed forces use space for. That is communication, for navigation, and for ISR. ISR is intelligence, surveillance, and recce. But the numbers we have do not give us what we require. We require persistent ISR. That is continuous ISR. To put it very simply, like the air chief would say, that my pilot, when it goes to attack Pakistan, by the time he's turning around, I should get a picture of what damage has been done. Then I send the next aircraft based on that. So that capability, presently, there is a gap.
Okay.
That will require more satellites to be put by India. Presently, we were getting this information by using companies, international companies, European and American. But in the future, we have to have that capability with us.
Operation Sindoor, in terms of how it was, and the equipment we used, the weapons we used, including drones and air defense, do you believe that constitutes a huge change from how wars were fought on the Indian border before this?
So it changes some things which will happen, like Op Sindoor, that is Operation Short of War, where non-contact warfare, where without troops clashing with each other, you will fight a war. And for such a war, very clearly we saw drones, aircrafts, missiles become much more important to fight a war.
And the fact that we had everything.
Yes. And this is very important for all armies, if they have to be prepared to fight the next war and not the last war.
And we were prepared when it mattered. Wonderful. As Director General of the Indian Space Association, the whole idea of a war in space, how real is it?
Okay, so let me firstly, as a Director General of the Indian Space Association, my job is to ensure that private sector develops enough capability to be able to support military use and civilian use.
When you say private sector, you mean Indian private sector.
Indian.
Right now, we are dependent on...
I'm talking about Indian private sector.
Right. Global private sector. We are dependent on them right now.
The first step has been taken, and I'll tell you about it. the Indian Armed Forces are now ordered 52 satellites to be made for ISR. Out of those 52 satellites, 31 satellites are being manufactured by the private sector.
Beautiful.
There are two companies who are ready to launch orbital rockets. This means they will have the capability to launch satellites for the Indian Armed Forces in quick time if required.
And what about critics who say that this should be not farmed out to the private sector and the government should have it within its own ambit? Because there are some of those.
So you're very right. Maybe this would be more relevant 10 years or 20 years back. We have to see the new space age which has emerged in the world. Likes of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Branson, the owner of Virgin Galactic, have just changed the story in space. Today, the Indian International Space Station, the rockets which go to it do not belong to any sovereign. They do not belong to NASA. They belong to a private player. Today, the largest number of rocket launches has been done by Starlink, SpaceX, and not by any country. It has definitely done more launches than any other country, including China.
And civil military cooperation, that's what you're talking about. You're saying, when I am saying civil, I mean the private sector. So you mean the civil. What is the biggest gap as far as India is concerned in the cooperation between these two in space?
So, like I would give you an example of space. Till 2020, civilian companies in India were only suppliers to ISRO. They could not do a complete job. What the government did was it opened up space to the private sector, and it was like unshackling space for India. What it has done is today private players are allowed to make rockets. They are allowed to make satellites for communication, satellites for ISR, and even do asteroid mining if they're capable of. So we have, by making the space bill, we are allowing space companies to do everything. Of course, it doesn't happen in a day. From 2020 to 2025, the private sector has proved its mettle. They are ready to launch rockets. 5 of them have launched satellites, and they will do much more. And what the advantage of a private sector is that there is more deftness, there is more ability to take risks, especially amongst the startups. And what a crop of startups we have in India. Full of energy, capable, ready to take risks, and they will take India far ahead.
Do you see the beginning of a SpaceX-like entity in the Indian ecosystem?
That is what I'm aspiring for, and that is when, in summary, when people ask me what do I do, I'm looking for Elon Musk in India.
You're looking for your Elon Musk, and have you found them yet?
Capability-wise, yes, but maybe the deep pockets are not so deep, and that is where one has to ensure that money also comes to them, that they are able to live up to their dreams.
How do you convince a brilliant civil engineer that their tech can be decisive in a war?
Oh yes, so something in the last few years the Indian Armed Forces have done is what they call it the IDEX challenges. That is, their challenges, something any young man wants to make. He is incentivized by being given a grant of, say, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, 25 lakhs. They are interacting more with the armed forces to understand what the armed forces would require. And many very creative ideas are coming from these young men, supported by some kind of finances by the three forces. And this has really helped. And I took advantage of this by getting IDEX space challenges made. Today we have 75 IDEX space challenges which define what the armed forces require in the future. And this has been given to these young men to work on it and build it for India.
Wonderful. And we have something coming in from them.
Already 30 to 40 challenges have been granted to them and they're working on it.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Post Operation Sindoor, according to you, what are the things that India can do to sort of, any rules to guide crisis management at a time like what we saw, during Opsindur?
What happened in Opsindur from the beginning to the end? Like very rightly, the army chief said, it was not a surprise to him because it had been discussed by him when he was a young officer doing a course. So, very important for the army, armed forces is to prepare for what are the likely contingencies which can happen in the future. Fortunately, we have a political leadership which provides you the total support with clarity. Like if you see in Opsindur, we were very clear what is our aim. Our aim is to target the perpetrators and not go for a war. We did it. We achieved it in the first 24 hours. And thereafter, of course, and that is why Pakistan also was given the message very clearly. You want to risk doing anything like Pahalgaon again, you will get it more. And that is the way we have to do it. But very importantly for India, and that is what I very strongly believe, our bigger adversary is up north. We should not lose our major adversary's capabilities and how do we counter it.
And of course, you're referring to China, but as of now, we need to be very clear that China is not backing down anytime soon as far as our border situation is concerned. You're saying they have a problem even setting up a hotline with us. How do you deal with that enemy at this point? You said you learned quite a few lessons when you interacted with them pre-Doklam, face to face. What were those lessons that you learned on how to tackle the Chinese?
So the most important thing is avenues of talking. Like post-Doklam, we had a major crisis in Galwan, as you are aware of. And throughout that crisis, border person meetings at the level of corps commander, divisional commander continued, brigade commanders continued. Because it is very important that it is a border which is complicated. There are perceptions on both sides which have been going on not for today but for the last, ever since our independence, because our borders with China have not been defined. The solution would be that both sides sit down and define it. But maybe China doesn't seem to be interested to do it. It requires political resolve, and now with the differential in their capabilities, they are a little overconfident. But for us, what is important is manage this border of ours properly. Manage it with wisdom and capability. And like I said, ultimately any adversary can be stopped. A war can be prevented if you have strength. If you are weak, anybody can walk over you.
Right. What's a leadership lesson from Doklam that you would perhaps quote to younger officers today or even to entrepreneurs in the space area who you work with?
In a situation of crisis, the buck stops at you. You cannot look beyond your shoulder to take advice. You have to take a decision. It will be fraught with risks. It will be fraught with challenges. But if you have prepared in your mind the most difficult option, you will not be surprised when it happens.
All right. What is the toughest leadership call that you've ever taken?
Okay. That's a very difficult question to ask. But every time when one orders troops to go the harm's way, and you're not sure, and you know maybe there will be casualties, it is, at the end of it, you have to take a tough call. And it has happened not once, but number of times. And the most difficult, of course, was Doklam, when you had to, you had the weight of taking, maybe
Triggering a
war for your nation, which would not have been advisable.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to get into a quick rapid fire with you. One word or one sentence answers. Doklam in one word.
Indian Army's resolve.
An underestimated PLA capability.
The technical ability which is growing by leaps and bounds.
A drone capability that India must master.
Counter drone capability.
Okay. India's biggest strategic advantage in space?
Our 60 years of legacy of handling space.
The military innovation that India needed yesterday.
More capabilities in electronic warfare.
All right. And one moment from your career that changed you forever. And this can be a longer answer.
I would maybe I'll again and again go to Doklam, but yes, before when Doklam happened, it was for me. Firstly, becoming a DGMO was a dream. For any military professional, it is the best thing. But it is the weight and responsibility of the entire Indian Armed Forces and, in a way, of the country which comes on you. And then you have to decide on this very, very critical grey zone, advise your chief to take the best option. Because if you advise him on that, you are also to be prepared
To take the blame if it falls flat.
And but it definitely has made me more stronger, better, a better professional.
All right. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for your service to the nation, to allow us to sleep peacefully while you were out there fortifying our borders. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any message you would like to give the people of this nation?
Firstly, I've been very fortunate that I have served in the Indian Armed Forces, been there for 40 years, and of many of my strengths while I served until today has been the faith of every Indian on the Indian Armed Forces. And that is all what we require from you.
Wonderful, sir. Jai Hind. Thank you.